Official, the UK is in recession, and it's not just any recession. It's a fall of 20.4% in gross domestic product in the second quarter alone, so over the lockdown period. That is an unprecedented number. We have literally never seen anything like that in terms of the scale of the fall in the economy. It is the biggest recession that the UK has ever faced in terms of depth since GDP was invented, basically, back in the 1930s. And even if you go back to the 1920s, which is the period that we have quarterly numbers for, we've never seen anything like that before. Now, none of this will necessarily come as a massive surprise. We all knew this was going to be a very big fall in gross domestic product, but the scale of it, to put it into context, is greater than we've seen in any other G7 economies. So among France, the US, other major economies like Germany, they've all had very big falls in GDP, but mostly it's been around the kind of 10%, the early teens, 13.8% in France. 20% is far greater than that, and that's what we've just received from the ONS. So it is a recession. That is a kind of relatively arbitrary term in economics to say that any period where you have 2 quarters of contraction, and we had minus 2.2 in the first quarter, and now it's minus 20.4, is a recession. But as I say, this is unlike any recession we've ever seen in British or indeed global history. And that's for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the depth of it, the scale of it is absolutely enormous. But secondly, and perhaps most importantly, this is a recession that was brought on partly by those lockdown measures to try to keep the virus under control. The big question now is whether there can be any bounce back in the next few quarters, and we'll be delving through those numbers to get a sense of whether there are early signs of that at the moment. It's more or less in line with what economists had expected, but nonetheless, when you look at this, we were all expecting a very big fall indeed, but just to see it in black and white there, when you look at the numbers that are just out from the Office for National Statistics, I had to keep looking at it to remind myself it's real, 20.4%. We've literally never seen anything like it before.
It was hoped by this point in the pandemic the nation might be bouncing back. Instead, the governor of the Bank of England today warned of deep, long-term economic scarring. The fear now for many is that the question has changed from when to whether those jobs will return or whether they've gone forever.
Now, as unemployment rises here, the International Monetary Fund is warning about the hit to living standards worldwide. Our economics correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, is in Westminster with the details. Helia.
John, as you said, IMF today are saying that the cost of COVID globally is going to be $28 trillion. Now, that is a significant hit, both to global poverty and living standards. They also do this rather interesting scorecard for how the UK is doing compared to its other countries. Let's take a look at how things looked back in June. Now here's how they look today. You can see that while the US, the picture is bad, it's improved substantially. And Germany has also been upgraded. And even France, which had one of the worst forecasts of any country around the world, has had some improvement. In the UK, despite having £192 billion pumped into the economy, we've seen hardly any improvement at all. And that's a real indictment. And here you have a key judgment from the IMF about policy choices, because they say that stricter national lockdowns for a short amount of time are really the only way not only to control the virus, but also protect the economy. This whole idea about tinkering around the edges in order to do better for the economy is an illusion, they say. And given what we heard earlier from Gary talking about the choices made in the UK about ignoring SAGE, that's rather interesting.
Largest recession on record because of the coronavirus lockdown, contracting by more than 20% between April and June in the biggest slump of any major global economy. The recession, defined by 6 months in a row of falling output, is the first since the 2008 financial crash. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, said the figures confirmed that hard times were here and many more people are expected to lose their jobs. Here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
This is a recession like no other, a consequence of having to shut the economy down. The result is an unprecedented hit, the hope that it proves to be short-lived. At this Somerset outdoor events manufacturer, what remains of dozens of music, sports and cultural events that never occurred.
This shed would normally be completely empty at this time of year.
Recovery here far from assured.
It was heartbreaking, a lot of it. The March, April, May time, it was really rough. You try and stay positive, but for some of our staff, they couldn't stay with us longer term. That was horrible.
A fall of over 20% isn't just a record, but it's off all historical scales. The last recession, the great financial crisis of 2008-9, saw a worst 3-month fall of just over 2%. Go back the entire history of official calculations, and there's never been a fall bigger than 3%.
I said that hard times were coming, and what today's numbers show is that hard times are here. Hundreds of thousands of people have already lost their job, and sadly, many more will.
The lost international tourism has been replaced by domestic tourists, tempted out by the Chancellor's cheap meals.
We're maybe 35 to 40% of normal.
In nearly 4 decades here, the local antiques shop has seen nothing like this.
Shop here that's closed, I don't know when they're reopening. Another one there, it's closed down. I think they have gone under, I don't think they'll be back. In the main street, there are several.
So people are kind of holding on.
Yeah.
The government said that they had a bridge to the other side.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to make it through.
Not everyone will make it through.
The official confirmation of a recession is no surprise, but the number reported this morning was simply staggering. A colossal hit to the economy, affecting every high street and home up and down the country, mainly in March and in April.
While the recession was inevitable, it doesn't explain why the UK has been amongst the worst hit of major nations, both in terms of health and the economy. This morning's number the worst of the major G7 economies, reporting so far from France to the US, with Canada and Japan also forecast to confirm smaller hits.
Are there not some questions about how your government has handled this, that we are bottom of both these tables?
Social activities, for example, going to have a meal, go shopping, go see a movie, those kinds of activities comprise a much larger share of our economy than they do for most of our European cousins.
The opposition said the recession showed the need to retain the furlough job scheme beyond the autumn.
We need to have targeted financial backing. We haven't had that sufficiently yet from the Conservative government, and we really need it. I think until we have that, we'll continue to see potentially a deeper recession in the UK than in other countries.
But the Chancellor adamant today that the scheme will not be extended, that the economy and people will have to adapt, that some jobs will not return after this record pandemic recession. Faisal Islam, BBC News in Bath.
Well, the Chancellor said that the UK is grappling with something unprecedented and warned there would be more job losses to come. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson has been speaking to 3 people in the East Midlands to find out what impact it is having on them and their businesses.
We're 82 years old, set up by my grandfather in 1937, right at the dawn of the jet age.
Over the years, this engineering business has survived umpteen recessions, but it's never seen a downturn like this.
So this is a turbine blade. This is very typical of the product we make, and if people aren't flying and airliners are on the ground, then no new planes are needed, no spares are needed.
His orders collapsed and Andrew had to let 50 staff go, nearly half his workforce.
These are good people, these are skilled people, the people who've worked for us in many instances for decades.
I mean, how tough has that been?
Inordinately tough. I know my employees and they know me, and then you have to say goodbye to half. That's tough. But much harder would be not making that decision and ending up with, frankly, no business.
The long-term future looks brighter. He's also keeping his apprentices, but can't take on any more. They're feeling the knock-on effects at this training provider.
What we do is we focus on the fundamentals of engineering. We believe that's the right way to do it.
Benjamin's hoping for an apprenticeship here, but there will be 40% fewer places than usual as employers rein back.
It's a bit nerve-wracking, really, just because it's the uncertainty of we don't know if it's going to go back to normal.
What does this recession mean for you?
I do feel like it will affect the younger generation a lot more than the older ones, because we're the ones who are coming up in the learning at the minute. We're the ones who are the newer generation who are going to be going into the workforce when the older workforce retire.
Sophie's self-employed and she's focused on trying to keep the show on the road. She designs high-end weddings and events.
The pressure's been immense. It's been extremely stressful.
This is just her showroom. Her real weddings have been postponed till next year. She's got to keep the plate spinning now.
I'm going to pay my staff for November and December despite having no work. What about January? What about February? Can I start my weddings again? If I know it's going to be 5 months, then I can forecast, I can plan for that. I'm waiting for all those little answers, those little tick boxes, before I can know what direction I take. Feels a bit blind.
She's determined her business will make it, but like so many others, if only the economic uncertainty would come to an end. Emma Simpson, BBC News, Derby.